So a couple quick things for housekeeping. We are in webinar rather than a web meeting, so I just want to make sure that you guys realize that you don't have access to your audio and video at this time, but we do want this to be interactive. So if you do have questions, we want you to be able to use the raise hand button, and I can unmute you at that time. We also have a Q&A section. It's not really an active chat. It's directly for question and answer. But feel free to put messages in there if you need to share something with me, and also any questions that you might have for our presenter tonight. One thing I do want to just point out is sometimes whenever you join, you might join and it might just say iPad, or it might have a phone number, or it might just have your name and not the person that's with you. So you might have a partner or family member that's also taking training with you that needs the credit hours. If you rename yourself in your box, I will make sure that that gets on your training certificate, because that's how it appears based on how that you're registered. If that doesn't make sense and you want to make sure that your certificate is right, you can literally put the name that you need on there for in the Q&A, and I will edit that as I go in and develop the certificates. Certificates will be sent to you in about a week. Just give me about until like Monday to get those done. And they will come from Gutenberg certificates. So some people have asked where they are if they haven't received them. And the service we use is Gutenberg certificates, so that might end up in your junk mail. So just making sure that you guys check your junk mail. But you can always email me. My email address is erica.burgess@ffa-nc.org. I will put that in Q&A just so people can reference it. But you can always email me if you don't get your certificate or you have questions about the session. So as I shared, we are recording. What we're trying to do this year is make sure that everything that we record gets on the website so that you could go back and view it later if you need to. If our presenter has any handouts that they can share, I will get those to you as well. Sometimes that might come in the form of an email because it's a little difficult using the system to send that. So just be on the lookout for those things. Okay, I think that's all the housekeeping. Sarah has a lot of information to share with you tonight. Sarah Martin from Safe House Project will be talking to us about human trafficking, and just a heads up that this month is Human Trafficking Awareness. So I'm going to pass it on over to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Erica. I'm so excited to be here with you guys tonight. Just a little bit about me and a little bit about my background. So as Erica mentioned, I work at Safe House Project. We are a national level nonprofit that helps survivors of human trafficking to leave their situations, to find that next resource, that next step towards their independence. We also help fund programs that provide resources for survivors of human trafficking. We advocate for policy that helps support survivors of human trafficking. And we provide trainings, webinars. We're in this fight in so many different ways, trying to get after this issue, because we have the audacious belief that if everyone comes together as a community in the United States, that we can eradicate child sex trafficking in the United States. So that is our audacious belief. That is why we do what we do. And just a little bit of background about my organization. I personally have been with Safe House Project since 2023. I joined the team late that year, and I went to the survivor support team. So I was working one-on-one with survivors. They would call in. They would say, hey, I'm still with my trafficker. Or, hey, we just picked up this youth from this situation out of their home, and we have them at the hospital now. What do we do with them next? Or, hey, I think I might be being trafficked. What does this mean again? So I was working with individuals. I helped place over 130 individuals into a safe resource, or their next safe step, be that detox, mental health care, emergency shelter, long-term programs, transitional housing, in that year when I was with the survivor support team. Here in 2025, I transitioned over and became the regional operations manager for Safe House Project. So now I focus on training and getting to know resources at a more localized level, trying to break down our big goal of helping all of the United States and making that goal smaller into more achievable chunks by really focusing on individual regions and states and how we can interact and support each other there. So that's my background. The reason I'm so excited to join you guys today is because, as I shared with Erica, I am actually joining y'all's ranks. My husband is in the other room doing his foster parent training right now. So I am very excited. We're hoping to expand our family and be welcoming those who are in foster care into our own home here very soon. So, so excited. I'm so passionate about being able to help you guys identify the signs of trafficking and to hopefully have a little bit more of awareness of where some of the foster youth that are in your homes are going to be coming into your homes might have seen, experienced, and just give you just a little bit more general understanding of what's going on, what is trafficking, and what can we do about it. So I'm sure you guys are no strangers to heavy topics in a lot of these trainings, but if at any point you need to step away, please feel free to do so. This is a heavy subject. I will try to not dive or over dramatize anything. I'm not going to try to use, I don't use scare tactics. I don't use fear in any of my trainings, anything like that as like attention getters. That's really not my style. That's really not what we're all about. So let me share my slides with you guys and I will dive on in. All right. So that's our organization logo there. So here you have our team. Christy Wells is our CEO and co-founder, and Brittany Dunn was also our other co-founder and chief operating officer. And that's me on the right. I'm our regional operations manager. So I shared with you a little bit at the beginning. Our mission and vision as an organization is to increase survivor identification beyond 1% through education, providing emergency services, placement of survivors into safe homes or their next safe step to help them get closer and closer to independence. Ensuring every survivor has access to safe housing and holistic care by accelerating safe housing capacity and development across the United States. And that vision is to unite communities, end domestic sex trafficking, and restore hope, freedom, and a future to every survivor. So today we're going to be going over trafficking in America, types of trafficking, identification and reporting, some mental health effects, and I will briefly touch on residential care and support, what some of those resources might look like. All right, so trafficking in the United States, this is where I want to start hearing from you guys. What do you think sex trafficking looks like? If someone in your neighborhood, in your apartment complex, at your children's school, at your church, at your community center was being trafficked, what would that look like? What do you think that looks like here in the United States?
And feel free to raise your hand and then I can unmute you.
There we go.
All right, you should be able to go, Deidre.
I look at it as being normal, everyday people. They don't look any different. Probably more teenagers than older females and males. So I look at them being the everyday children that we would have in our homes or our own children.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Most of the people who are being trafficked are going to look like everyday people, people you run into at the grocery store. They're not going, it's not going to look like what you see in the movies where, they're wearing chains, they're beat
Hmm.
up all the time. It's not necessarily going to look like that. Like there are situations where that can happen, but most of the time you're right, Deidre, this is going to be, that's going to look pretty normal at first glance. Very good. Any other thoughts?
Yep. Let's go with Marina.
All right.
Go ahead, Marina. You can unmute. There you go.
I was gonna say the same thing. I think it's one of those things that it's like hidden in plain sight, and it's a lot of our vulnerable population, maybe people who don't have support, of course, children, and even I feel like older people, and a lot of I feel like sometimes that when we think of trafficking, we may think of women, but I think it's also men, and
Hmm.
men also go through it too.
Hmm.
Absolutely. That's a great point that yes, men also go through it too. I think there's a lot of societal norms and gender norms, unfortunately, in our culture that kind of prevent men from coming forward as often with their stories and what they've experienced. And we'll talk about that here in a minute as well. But you're absolutely right. Like it can happen across a wide range of ages. It does tend to be more prevalent in that young adult-ish range and in
Mhm.
teens. But yeah, those are all great points. Is there anyone else with their hand up, Erica?
You have one more person. I think it's Charlotte.
All right.
Yes, it's me, Erica. I didn't realize we had to put our real name on here, so I was
It's okay.
going
You
a
have
little
a cool name. I
incognito.
know it's you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, hi. I'm a foster parent, and one of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes, unfortunately, parents traffic their nonverbal children.
Mm,
Um, and so I used to foster 0 to 6, and that was a heavy population where those 2 to 4 year olds were actually being trafficked by their parents, and
mhm.
in the community more so than like what we typically think of like a national chain, but just like family members were selling their children, and and there was a ring. So and then they're nonverbal, so they're not sharing any of that information, and they're usually not in school. So then you usually don't find out until they're school age, and then get into therapy and act out, and then you find out the history of that child. So that's just a
Absolutely.
population that's not really talked about.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and that's something we're going to be diving into as well. Is a lot of times traffickers will take advantage of those who are disabled, who are nonverbal, who maybe rely on others for medical care or just everyday tasks. It's very unfortunate. But yeah, that is a vulnerability that can lead to a trafficking situation. You also touched on familial trafficking, where there, like you said, there might not be this big crime ring behind it, but maybe it's just the parents or the caregivers in this situation selling their child for a business deal, for drug money, for just even just sustaining themselves and surviving for food and groceries or for rent. A lot of times you'll see that familial trafficking, you'll see nationally in terms of what we see. 40% of all trafficking cases in the United States are familial trafficking that we've encountered. So that's very prevalent here in the US. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, so those are all great observations. Let's get into the definition of human trafficking here. So, sex trafficking in particular, we'll also kind of briefly touch on labor trafficking. A sex trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purposes of a commercial sex act in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. So there's a lot of big words in there. We're going to kind of break that down. I do want to make the important note, though, that for individuals under the age of 18, they are considered to be victims of sex trafficking, regardless of the use of force, fraud, or coercion, because they cannot legally consent to sex at the federal level. They cannot consent to selling sex acts. So there's no such thing as a child prostitute. There is no such thing as a child consenting to film pornography. That those are not neither of those actions are legal, and that is considered an adult taking advantage of a youth or someone who cannot consent. So sex trafficking is recruitment, harboring, or transportation. We mentioned transportation is optional because, as we mentioned, Charlotte mentioned earlier, familial trafficking in a lot of cases never leaves the home of the individual. They don't necessarily have to leave or be transported in order to be trafficked. You let's see. You also see containing purposes of a commercial sex act. A lot of times, commercial sex act it's kind of an all-encompassing term because this can also mean camming. I wanted to point that out because in the audience, we're looking at specifically as foster parents, youth who have a huge online presence will often get coerced or exploited into camming themselves or filming sex acts on camera in a group chat or on some sort of online platform, and that is still considered a commercial sex act. Erica?
Just making sure you're saying camming.
Yes,
And like, I've never heard
camming.
that word before. So
Sorry, that's
camming
the
is,
slang word. Yes.
and it's for recording yourself.
Yes, so be
Okay.
recording yourself. We've unfortunately worked with minors who have done this, stripping in front of a webcam or touching themselves in front of a webcam for profit, or because someone else online coerced them into doing it, and then that third party is profiting off of those acts. Or they're using it as kind of a revenge porn thing where they're like, okay, we're going to send this to your parents and show everyone what you're doing if you don't log in every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. and do this for us. So we'll talk about that in sextortion a little bit later. But yes,
Thank you. I
camming.
just wanted to get up that terminology in case
Yes,
anybody else needed it too.
absolutely. Very good. All right. So that's the sex trafficking definition. Minor sex trafficking is any time sex is exchanged for money or something of value. So it doesn't necessarily have to be money. It can be the latest Coach handbag. A lot of times we'll see youth who come to us who have been sex trafficked, and they're very fashionable. They have all the latest goodies, because unfortunately there is a trafficker who is there trying to supply them with that emotional need for status, for social approval, and they're trying to fill that by having them perform sex acts and give them that incentive of, here's the latest Fendi bag, here's the latest clothes, here's that album you wanted, like all of those things. So it can be also drugs, it can be food, it can be protection, or hey, money for your sister to go to college. There's a lot of different ways where that something of value can take form that's not necessarily money. The sex trafficking of minors, the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision. It's basically the same definition, but again, you don't have to prove that force, fraud, or coercion if the individual involved is a minor. So some common myths and misconceptions that we often hear at Safe House Project about what trafficking looks like, which thankfully I'm impressed. You guys seem to have a lot of knowledge and background around this already. I didn't hear any of these when we were talking earlier. But the first one here is that trafficking only affects foreign nationals or immigrants. A lot of people will get confused between human smuggling and human trafficking. So human smuggling is when there's that incentive or someone's paying to cross a border illegally or enter the U.S. illegally. There is, that concern in foreign nationals and people who have been smuggled into the United States can absolutely be trafficked as well. There is some intersectionality there. What we've found and what we've seen from the FBI statistics that they put out is that 80% of the human trafficking cases that are happening in the United States are US citizens trafficking fellow US citizens. So that while there is that 20% where foreign nationals and immigrants are involved, and those are obviously very serious, and there's some serious vulnerabilities there, the majority of what we look at in the United States and what we are talking about here in our training is citizens against citizens. The second myth or misconception that we often see is that victims of trafficking always come from situations of poverty. Unfortunately, I've worked a few cases in 2024 where this was not the case, where the trafficker was in a position of power in the government, was the CEO of a very well-financed company, was in the police department. There's a whole lot of different situations where individuals are trafficked, not necessarily due to an economic vulnerability. So it's important to look out even in communities where you wouldn't necessarily suspect it. Victims of trafficking tell their traffickers no, but are forced into the lifestyle against their will. A lot of times that relationship between a trafficker and their victim will evolve slowly over time. They play the long game. They build that trust and that relationship. We're going to talk about boyfriending as one of the many models of trafficking here in a little bit. But they will start to push their boundaries of the victim inch by inch until eventually they're selling this individual for sex. They're taking all the wages from it. The abuse gets more and more horrendous over time. So it might not necessarily start out as someone saying no and this being a completely forceful situation. This is not throwing someone into the back of a van in a Target parking lot. This may be a long-standing relationship that evolves over time in most cases. Fourth misconception here is that human trafficking is something that only happens in the movies or in other countries. I know part of my background is that I was in the military from 2012 to 2023, and when we got trained on human trafficking, it was taught to us as when you go overseas, you might see this happening. It was never taught to us that, oh, by the way, when you're home, you're stateside as well, you're probably going to see X, Y, and Z. That just wasn't how it was approached. But the reality is that trafficking is a $99 billion income generator for individuals in the United States. Unfortunately, that is more than the NFL, the NBA, and the NHS. Sorry, the Hockey League. I'm so not a sports person, but it's more than all of those organizations combined in the United States in terms of the revenue that it brings in. So it absolutely happens here in our home country, in the United States, and it isn't always what the movies make it out to be. And the most common myth that we see and that we work to dispel against trafficking is that human trafficking is not happening in my community, nor will I ever come across it. Most likely, you have seen somebody who is being trafficked. We know from surveying the survivors that we've worked with that 90% of them have gone to see a healthcare provider at some point while they were actively being trafficked. So a lot of times while there is a lot of control and movement and control in like where they go and where they see, a lot of times their children might still be going to school while they're being trafficked. They might still be out in front of their home playing with other kids. They may still be at the grocery store. They have to eat too. So it's a lot of times you may still be able to see people who are being trafficked and asking the right questions, staying curious, being on the lookout for signs and indicators that we're going to discuss in this training is super important. So in order to look at a trafficking case, we always use the AMP model, especially in cases where the victim is over 18 years old. So the AMP model includes action, means, and purpose. So this is used as the federal definition of a survivor of severe forms of trafficking in persons. In one part of each of these elements, actions, mean, or purpose, must be present in order to indicate that the survivor has not consented based on free will. So the AMP model, we look at action. So the trafficker must have taken some sort of action to induce or start the trafficking. Maybe they recruited someone based on a vulnerability. They saw that someone was nonverbal. And like, well, they can't rat on me. So this is a perfect time to be able to recruit this individual as a potential source of income. They might harbor individuals who are being trafficked, or maybe transporting them to dates or to clients or to meetups. They may be providing some of the resources needed in order to facilitate the trafficking, obtaining individuals who they will target to try to traffic, or soliciting, advertising the services of those that they're trying to sell online or in person. Sometimes we actually know of different, there's a legal group out in California that goes after hotel chains that profited off of trafficking taking place within their hotels. So they will get the money back from these hotel chains if they can prove that the hotel, someone on the staff of the hotel knew about this, that this was going on. So there thankfully are good guys in the fight that are going after that, and going after organizations that profit off of this activity. So action, that's what the traffickers are doing in order to facilitate the sale of a commercial sex act. Means, so this is where we look at how that control that they have. How are they? Where is that consent piece really breaking down into that this person can't consent, right? So force. If someone's putting a gun to my face and telling me to do something, I'm not going to stop and say, "Hey, just for the record, I don't consent." Right? So force is obviously something where you cannot consent, where you're being forced to do something. In this case, a commercial sex act. Fraud. So sometimes people will be frauded into selling commercial sex acts, saying, "Hey, we'll pay you at the end of the month, at the end of the year," or "Hey, we're sending the money back home to your family. Hey, this is you owe us all of this money. You owe us a lot of debt. In order to pay that off, you need to perform these acts for us." So fraud can come across in a lot of different ways. And coercion is probably the most common means that we see in order to keep people under control and to traffic them. So coercion meaning, okay, if you don't do this, I'm going to hurt your sister. I'm going to hurt your brother. I'm going to show your family all the things you've done. I'm going to hurt your pet. I knew a trafficking survivor who their trafficker had kidnapped their pet in order to try to control them and prevent them from coming forward to law enforcement. So there's a lot of coercion that can go on to prevent that person from being able to freely consent to what is happening. And then finally, purpose. We obviously talked about what is a commercial sex act. That doesn't necessarily have to be what you think of as traditional sex. It can be camming, filming of pornography, if you're being forced to strip for clients, things like that. And it can also be for labor. There is labor trafficking as well that happens here in the United States, where This gets a little fuzzy when we talk about what is labor trafficking versus what is a clear violation of labor laws. But typically, what you will see with labor trafficking is severely abusive conditions. I know there was one case I studied in Arizona where it was a carnival worker, where they had individuals who were physically chained to the back of a semi truck at night. They were working 18-hour days. They were getting paid maybe $10 a day for the work they were doing for this carnival. And they were being taken advantage of for their immigration status. There was also another case of labor trafficking that I studied, that was up, I want to say it was in the Midwest, somewhere up north, like Minnesota, where there was a labor trafficking survivor who was recruited as a nanny, but who, once she arrived, she had a language barrier. She didn't speak English. She had been working for a Chinese family before then, but they absolutely treated her like a dog. She could only eat whatever the children didn't eat. She couldn't leave the house. They would beat her with a belt. If she didn't comply, like she had to always be cleaning after the kids. She wasn't allowed to walk around the home. She could only crawl. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about labor trafficking situations is a severe abuse in exchange for physical labor that doesn't necessarily involve sex. So any questions around the AMP model or anything we've discussed so far? I know I can talk a little fast sometimes. All good?
I don't see any yet in the Q&A. So if you ever have a question, just raise your hand and I can call on you. But I think you're good right now, Sarah.
Perfect. Thank you, Erica. All right. So that's the action means purpose model. The hard truth about trafficking in the United States is that sex trafficking is the second largest criminal industry in the country, and it affects every age, every gender, every race, and every social class. So, a couple of statistics I like to tell people about just to kind of paint a picture of what is happening in the United States when it comes to sex trafficking. First is that hundreds and thousands of children and millions of adults are trafficked each year in the United States, according to our estimates. Because we know from our studies that you'll see at the bottom statistic there that only 1% of victims in the United States are ever identified, that doesn't mean that they escape. That doesn't mean that their traffickers are brought to justice. That just means that somebody in either law enforcement or in survivor services understands that there is a person there and that that is what they are experiencing. Um, so the problem we estimate is a lot bigger than just that 1% that is coming forward that we know about because of the fear element that is involved, the control that the traffickers exude over this person's life. And a lot of times, too, people just don't survive being trafficked for very long. The average, I heard one time that the average life expectancy of someone who's being sex trafficked is maybe 5 years. So it's obviously not something that you can withstand for a very long period of time. In terms of age, the average start age of someone who's being trafficked is around 12 to 14 years old. So a lot of times, yeah, that is an age group that you will see in foster care in those systems. Deidre, I see your hand raised. Or was that from earlier?
No, she just raised it. Deidre, are you able to unmute or did you need me to do that again?
I think she might need you.
She should. Oh, okay, hold on. Let me find her. Oh, there we go. Sorry. I thought I was going to let her do it again.
I was saying, if the expectation of the length of time frame is only 5 years, so is it that they come out no longer be a participant of it or someone that's actually bodily harmed them?
A lot of times it's bodily harm. It's a result
Oh,
of a lot of times traffickers will force their victims to use drugs and other substances, and that takes a physical toll. They'll have
oh,
obviously limited access to healthcare services when they do get sick or injured. So the likelihood of an infection or a disease to take over
right.
and take its course, unfortunately, is a lot higher. So, yes.
Oh, wow. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So we talked about kind of the average time most people will spend in trafficking, as well as the ages when they're first trafficked. Um, 40% of child sex trafficking victims are first sold by their family members. So we did talk about that earlier when Charlotte brought up familial trafficking. And that is a very prevalent form of trafficking that happens here in the United States. In terms of gender impact, roughly 85% of the identified trafficking survivors are female, and that comes from service providers and law enforcement, is where we get that number. 14% are male, and 1% of those identified survivors are transgender. Adult males usually experience more labor trafficking, but over 60% of male victims, of minor male victims, are experiencing sex trafficking. It's estimated in the bottom left-hand corner there, you'll see that even though 85% of those identified today are female, the Department of Justice studies actually estimate that 33% of minor victims are likely to be male. When I was working in Arizona, there was a study that was coming out from Arizona State University that indicated in the city of Phoenix, amongst the minors they surveyed who'd experienced human trafficking, close to 50% were actually male in that particular study. So it obviously varies by city or region. It was just kind of a smaller sample size in that particular study, but it definitely shines a light on the fact that males are underrepresented a lot of times in reporting and amongst those who are seeking services. In terms of ages and relationships, the pie graph over there, you'll see on the left, you'll see that over half of human trafficking survivors were first trafficked when they were under the age of 18. So Charlotte brought up earlier that the minors that she was working with a lot of times were in that younger age group. Here you'll see that 0 to 8 age range, about 2 to 3% of individuals who are trafficked will start at that age. A good majority start between the ages of 9 and 17 years old. 15%, 18 to 20, and so on and so forth. So while it is rare to see individuals who are over 40 being trafficked, it still does happen. I've served trafficking survivors who were in their 50s. A lot of times it started when they were a lot younger, or maybe they got into a situation where they became homeless and had to resort to survival sex as they got older. We'll talk about that a little bit more later as well, but it still does happen. It doesn't mean that we can be just not look out for those who are over the age of 40 when it comes to being trafficked. But these are the age ranges that we normally see at the time of first trafficking. When it comes to relationships of the trafficker as it pertains to the victim, amongst adult trafficking survivors, there's about 10% who are trafficked by their family members, but minors, obviously that bar is a lot higher, so it's about 45%. When there's trafficking going on, they're being trafficked by a family member. You can see there for friends, for intimate partners, other. So a lot of times this can be a coach, a teacher, this can be an employer. But something that started off as completely legitimate work that turns into something more sketchy on the side. This could be, I'm trying to think of some of the other examples that I've seen. Landlord. I've seen, a lot of different situations where the trafficker might have some sort of other relationship. It's very rare that the trafficker will not know their victim in some way, shape, or form, or have some sort of relationship prior. Like there's maybe 2 to 5% of the cases where there will be just zero background or connection between the two individuals prior to being trafficked. I think there's a lot of fear amongst the general public in the United States that, if you see a zip tie tied to your door handle of your car when you're in a Target parking lot, that means a trafficker is looking for you. Most likely not. There's a lot of like folklore and just myth that goes on around trafficking. So that I can hopefully kind of calm some of those fears by letting you know that the likelihood of a stranger just coming up to you in a parking lot and trafficking you from there is very low. And that's not what we see. All right, types of trafficking. So we've touched on these a little bit, and I know I mentioned earlier that trafficking in the United States is a $99 billion criminal enterprise. Globally, it's estimated to be bringing in between $250 and $500 million across the globe. We talked a little bit about familial trafficking, where a family member will sell their child in exchange for something of monetary value, including rent, cash, drugs, business deals, etc. The children are often unaware that money is being exchanged in the background. And a lot of times the children have been groomed from a young age to believe that this is completely normal. And so a lot of times too, we've seen this happen in where you see multi-generational trauma. This might be something that you've learned about in your other trainings where it was normalized for the mother. She went through this when she was a child, and now she's like, okay, it's my child's turn to bring in the money for the family. This is what I had to do it. Now it's their turn. I know I saw at least one case of that in the youth that I was working with up in northern parts of North Carolina and some of the more rural areas. So that's definitely, and this is about 40% of all trafficking situations that we see across the United States fall into this familial trafficking category. Boyfriending is one I don't think we've touched on yet. So this is where a romantic relationship is formed with the victim, and it's eventually becomes more and more controlling. And the trafficker will use psychological manipulation in order to sell their victim in this case. So an example of this would be, hey, your parents seem super strict and controlling. Like, let's go to Las Vegas together. That'll be a lot more fun. Like, we can go smoke weed. Everything's legal out there. Hey, we've got this great thing going. Like, I'm going to take care of you. Oh, hey, we're tight on finances though. So will you just, if you just sleep with my friend this one time, that'll get us the money we need to go to Vegas. Oh, hey, that actually didn't get us enough money. Hey, I'm gonna have to have you do that a few more times. This is for us. This is because I love you. This is because I want to build a future with you. And that manipulation just continues to spiral. Um, so that's a very common one that's used to lure youth into a trafficking situation. Guerrilla trafficking, we talked about where this is what you see most commonly in movies, where the trafficker is using physical violence or and force in order to control their victims. They're physically chaining them to a wall. It does happen, like I mentioned in the labor trafficking case out of Arizona, where there was a carnival, and the individuals who were being labor trafficked were physically tied to the back of the semi truck. So we do want to teach you about it. We do want to obviously keep an awareness about that. If a victim is resistant, sometimes they will be turned out and they may be put through a seasoning process of extreme mental, physical, and sexual abuse. So that's what we consider guerrilla trafficking. This, thankfully, is a minority of situations of trafficking in the United States, but it does absolutely still happen. I think it gets sensationalized in the news and in the media a lot, but it is absolutely something to be aware of and does take place. The last category here, in terms of common models or methods of trafficking that we see here in the US, is survival sex. So this is a sex act that's engaged in due to extreme need. So you'll have an individual who's experiencing homelessness or other societal disadvantages, and they'll commonly engage in survival sex in order to secure food, a place to sleep, other basic needs, drugs. Sometimes people will steal their medications that they need and hold that hostage in order to engage in a sex act. Those are considered sex trafficking because you have a sex act being performed in exchange for something of value due to the means of force, fraud, or coercion that we talked about in that AMP model. So survival sex does fall under the category of sex trafficking. Any questions on the models or the types of trafficking that we see here in the United States? Check my time.
I don't have anything in the Q&A and I don't see any hands.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I do want to talk about adverse childhood experiences or ACEs. You may have heard them referred to as like a scorecard, like an ACEs scorecard before. The more of these experiences that a child has, that increases their vulnerability significantly to being trafficked potentially. So it doesn't mean that every child who's experienced these is going to be trafficked. It just increases that likelihood or that vulnerability of potentially being trafficked. So, and a lot of these are things that we're going to see as foster parents and the youth that we serve and support. So obviously, those who have experienced physical abuse, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse in the past, those who have been neglected physically or emotionally, any type of household dysfunction where there was severe mental illness, divorce, an incarcerated relative, where the mother was treated violently or there was some form of substance abuse in the home. Those all create those vulnerabilities that provide a trafficker an opportunity to fill unmet needs, to be able to come and say, okay, well, I've got a stable place. You can come stay at my place instead of being with your parents. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to have my friends come over oh, by the way, I need you to make some money for me while you're staying here. So it increases those vulnerabilities and those opportunities for, like I said, traffickers to come in and try to fill unmet needs. Grooming. So, grooming is a process that can take place online or in person. This consists of manipulative behaviors that an abuser will use to gain access to a potential victim, to coerce them to agree to the abuse, and to reduce the risk of being caught. So, online, there's roughly 500,000 predators active online at any given day, trying to groom vulnerable individuals. So the first step of this is targeting vulnerability. They will look for youth who are not happy at home, who are looking to run away or looking for that escape, who feel that their needs are not being met. They actively seek out. I've actually, unfortunately, seen transcripts of conversations with traffickers from the FBI side where they are seeking out foster youth in particular because they know that these youth are coming from a very vulnerable place. The next step of this is gaining trust over time. I've heard that you can go from just meeting someone online to being exploited in 20 minutes flat. That's obviously on the fast side, but most of the cases that we see where grooming is taking place online happens over days, weeks, or even years. The trafficker oftentimes will just slow down, will try to build that trust. Oh, you can talk to me about what's going on. Oh, your mom's being mean. Well, you can tell me about that. Like I care about you. Hey, you don't have enough, cash in what is it, Apex Legends or Minecraft or whatever other video game. Here, I'll send you some credits so you can come play with me. You can get that new skin that you want. I'm your friend. I'm here for you. They build that trust over time. Again, they'll try to meet unmet needs. And then once they feel like they have a significant amount of trust built up, they will start trying to isolate that person from their peers. That's when they'll start sending messages to these children of, well, you can't trust your mom. Remember, she's so mean to you. You can trust me though, because I'm your friend. Those children will start seeing those sort of messages online. And then from there, once the child no longer feels that they can turn to their peers, to their parents, to teachers, and so forth who are in their lives, that's when the exploitation is typically introduced, where they will first be asked to go meet up with someone who's grooming them in person, where they'll be asked to jump on a webcam and start, removing clothing and those sort of things. And then over time, those images that are produced from those events or those interactions will be used to maintain control of that youth and to try to continue to sell them again and again in order to bring in revenue for the trafficker. So sextortion is something that has been increasing, unfortunately, in terms of prevalence over the last 5 years. This is an online crime where youth are exploited through blackmail or coercion in order to send explicit images, videos, manipulate, extort money, or engage in sexual activity. So just for broad background knowledge, 1 in 5 teens in the United States are sexting. That's just the age that we live in. When teens have access to phones, they're exploring things. They're getting into new relationships. They're trying to see, they're learning what sex is all about. That's just the reality of the world that we're living in. 1 in 5 of them are engaging in sexting. Of those kids, 2 out of 3 will experience sextortion before the age of 16. Those are the stats that we know from NCBIC, which is an organization of the National. Wow, I'm blanking on it. But it's for missing and exploited children. They're the ones that run information on children that are missing. They do a lot of these studies as well on sextortion. They have a lot of great resources that are out there. If your child does have a image of themselves that's online that you want removed, they have a lot of great resources for that on how they can take it down. So of those who are being sextorted, 1 in 4 victims of sextortion are under the age of 13, unfortunately. 47% of victims of sextortion will experience daily threats, and over half of exploiters are going to be acting on these threats, unfortunately. So that increased use of social media and messaging platforms has obviously driven the rise in sextortion. A lot of times you'll see any youth who's been sextorted that they'll become overly protective of their phone, overly protective of their online content. I actually worked with a victim who she really believed that she wanted to engage in this type of activity. And when she went to a facility that was supposed to be helping her learn new skills and kind of break that cycle, she used a smart TV to access Instagram and to reach back out to her trafficker in order to try to generate more money. So if there's anything that connects to Wi-Fi, they can use it to connect to the internet to chat with their trafficker. They even go, I think I've even heard of like smart refrigerators these days. If it connects to Wi-Fi, these kids can unfortunately use it to connect, to chat, and to reconnect with a trafficker. So that's something to be very conscious of if you're working with a child that you know has had this pattern in the past, is that anything that connects to the Wi-Fi is a potential platform where this could continue. So let's see here. Digital safety. I know I'm getting close to, I want to make sure I give you guys plenty of time at the end to ask questions, but I will absolutely touch on digital safety since we were talking about sextortion. Predators will ask kids to move into other chat platforms like Discord or Twitch to monitor. So you want to be monitoring the apps that your kids are looking for in order to see spikes in usage. I have some platforms down here at the bottom of the slide, CyberDrive, Bark, and Google Families. These are all platforms that my team at Safe House Project has used in order to help keep their children safe online. So those are some of the ones that we always recommend when people reach out for us, like, okay, well, how do we keep track of what our kids are doing online? They can't just not have a phone. All their friends have a phone. How do we control that though? Or how do we put up a safety net for them to prevent them from being sextorted or from being groomed online? Those are some of the tools that we recommend. I also recommend disabling chat functions on popular video games and apps, enacting parental controls, turning off internet capabilities at night, even changing the Wi-Fi password at night if you need to. And that can be a good way to do this. It's important to note too that 2 out of 5 children and teens do not feel comfortable sharing their worst online experiences with someone. So this is important to just keep that open conversation with their kids about, okay, what is happening online? Hey, I saw you're on that video chat. Can you tell me about some of the friends that you've met on there? Just trying to maintain that relationship so that the children will feel like they can tell you when these things are happening is going to be super critical. We talked about familial trafficking, boyfriending. I know Charlotte brought up earlier that being disabled, unfortunately, is a vulnerability in that traffickers will look for individuals who are disabled in order to traffic them because it makes it less likely for them to be able to go to law enforcement, to be able to communicate what's been going on or what's been happening to them. A lot of times, those with speech issues are particularly vulnerable, like she mentioned. They can also be due to they have a desensitization to touch because people are constantly touching them, trying to help them get dressed, push them in the wheelchair, help them go use the restroom, those sort of things. So that can be a vulnerability. A lot of times they're isolated from their peers just because there's either a communication barrier or a physical barrier. Maybe they can't go access the playground the same way that their peers do. So that again, the vulnerabilities just add up when you have physical, mental, verbal disabilities. Signs to be looking out for with individuals with disabilities to see if they might be being trafficked is just being on the lookout for that physical and emotional trauma. If someone's nonverbal, just okay, how do they look? How, is their facial expression different? You obviously have to know the individual and know, what they look like and how they present when they're severely stressed versus when they're normal and in their day-to-day routine. You might see that these individuals are being pulled out of school regularly. From what we've seen, that's in order to perform the commercial sex acts outside of school, or maybe that's falsified as, hey, they're going to an appointment, but they're not actually going to an appointment. You may see frequent hospital visits due to injuries and some things that occur because of the trafficking. You may see that the individual with disabilities is, even when they have a voice, even when they have the ability to speak for themselves, if the adult is constantly getting in the way, or they're the person who's there to try to help them is constantly speaking for them, even when it doesn't seem necessary, that should be a red flag. Identification and reporting. So good news is that the groups that you see here highlighted in yellow do have mandated training on the topics of human trafficking here in the state of North Carolina. So law enforcement are required to be trained on this subject. Educators and students actually across the state of North Carolina are required through middle school and above to be trained on what human trafficking is and how to identify it. A lot of sectors that we'll see that can help us with identification of too is the juvenile justice system, child welfare workers, healthcare, prosecutors, and hospitality. Just as a glance, just for your information, the most important thing I wanted to point out on this side is that the fourth bullet in over here is that 31.2% of survivors have a child at the time of request. So when someone is coming to us saying, hey, I need help, I am being trafficked, 32% of those individuals have a child in care with them that they have legal guardianship or parental rights of. So even if those children aren't necessarily being trafficked themselves along with their parent, a lot of times they'll have that secondary trauma from having witnessed or been around it when their parent is going through this. Um, I'm sure you guys, I know I've seen in my foster care training the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is often used as, unfortunately, by traffickers to exploit. But it's also important to note that on the recovery side of trafficking, that if you want to help someone who's been trafficked, you've got to start with the basics, helping them feel safe. Regular food, regular water, sleep, shelter, knowing that they're safe. Okay, then we can move into, okay, is there someone coming after me? Do I have income? Do I have a way to provide for myself? Or, do I have parents who are going to consistently provide for me? Take me to the doctor when I need to, those sort of things. We have love and belonging, esteem, and self actualization. So you can build on this. And thankfully, resiliency, as we'll see on the next slide, is a learned skill. This is something that children can learn even after they've been exploited. And we've seen so many great stories of survivors going on, having successful careers, doing great things in life, reclaiming their lives after exploitation. So it is not a death sentence. It does not mean that they're going to be facing that they will always carry the weight of what they experienced with them, but they can still go forward and achieve great things. I also put the stages of behavior change on here too, because a lot of times people will ask us like, okay, well, why don't we reach out more to individuals that we know are being trafficked? Because we know that in order to help someone who's being trafficked, they have to decide to go. A lot of times we call them survivors rather than victims within our organization because we want to remember that onus of they have to make the choice to leave. A lot of times during police raids, God bless our law enforcement folks because they do some great work and they go kick down doors and they do amazing things putting traffickers behind bars. But without a plan for the victims in those cases, for the survivors, if you have no money, if you have nowhere to go, if you think your family hates you because you've been pimped out, they're going to go find another trafficker is what's going to happen next. So unless a survivor is actually contemplating change and is actually makes that decision to, I don't want to do this anymore, I can't do this anymore, we're not going to get through. So just recognizing that and even recognizing that in the youth that we serve is just like, okay, they have to internalize or they have to see, okay, this is where I could end up if I continue to try to reach out to my trafficker. As we see a lot of times with youth who especially are getting handbags, clothes, a lot of goodies, drugs, and things from adults that are trying to traffic them. Like there has to be a conscious decision at some point to step away from that in order to see success. So I did want to point that out as part of the stages of change here. So reporting suspected trafficking. So obviously, anytime you know that someone is in immediate danger, you can always call 911. That is your best first line of defense. If someone is a victim of trafficking, let's say they're away from their trafficker or they're just thinking about leaving their trafficker, or if there's a youth who's been recovered and you want to look at resources in terms of who can support them in the community next, or maybe you've just been had a foster youth who is placed in your home, and you will look at some non-residential resources and some wraparound support for individuals who've been trafficked. You can always reach us at the number you see here. We actually just got a new phone number last month too that I should have put in the slides, but I missed it. It's 8335 Be Safe. you can reach us at that number. You can also fill out a form at our website, safehouseproject.org/refer. And that will help us make sure that we can connect you to the resources that you need with individuals who really understand what it takes to recover from being trafficked, psychologically, emotionally, physically, to regain skills that, for example, that teenagers, when they should have been learning life skills and job skills, but were actually being trafficked, in order to have a chance to catch up on those, we can find all kinds of resources to help you guys in those situations. And if you have a tip that you want to report to law enforcement, or if you're not sure if something that you're seeing or have witnessed is actually trafficking, I highly recommend using simplyreport.com. You can use this QR code to get there, or you can download Simply Report from the App Store. This is something that our organization uses and monitors. We connect law enforcement to the back end of this. We can receive anonymous tips. You can even put this app on your children's phones. So if they see something or they're suspicious, and even if they don't want to bring it to you, or they haven't been in your home long enough to have that kind of trust yet, they can go here. They can ask, like, okay, is this trafficking? Is this something that's illegal? Like, what should I do about this? That is a safe place for them to go and report those things. So mental health effects. Let me check my time. I know I'm getting a little short. I did want to put a note on here that obviously those who have been trafficked are going to be experiencing complex trauma. So this is something I know that y'all are not strangers to. That those who've been through this are going to be experiencing complex PTSD, anxiety, depression. Those are the three most common. I think like 90% of the survivors we work with have either one or all three of those. They're also going to be exhibiting a lot of self-hatred, dissociation, substance abuse struggles are very common as that means of control for traffickers to use. You're going to see somatic ailments and eating disorders. A lot of those can come as a result of having experienced trafficking. On the support side, I just wanted to note there are great resources out there that thankfully are already in place. There are several that we know of that are in fundraising mode, that are in construction mode, that are trying to get in the fight. Some are residential. There are group homes specifically throughout the United States that specialize in serving those who have experienced trafficking and who will serve those that aren't a great fit for foster families, but the goal is to work with them to get them to a point where they can step down in care to go to a therapeutic foster family or go to that next level of care to make their childhood more normal, quote unquote. So there's a lot of great resources out there. There's also non-residential resources that are advocates, that are therapists, that are life skills coaches. There's a lot of survivors out there who go into coaching and mentoring youth because they've seen it firsthand. They know what it's like, and they can help relate to some of the youth who have gone through this. So there's lots of resources out there, and our organization, Safe House Project, would love to help connect you guys to those resources here in North Carolina, should you need those. So again, I pointed out resilience is a learned skill. There is so much hope on the other side of this. The story does not have to end at trafficking for the individuals who've experienced this. The heart of resilience is that belief in yourself, that belief in something larger. And resilient people refrain from blaming themselves. They externalize that blame and they internalize their success. This is something that they can learn, and with the right supports, with the right families, with the right people cheering them on, they can absolutely achieve. Past this. Some quick additional information before I jump into questions. My organization does offer a few different trainings if you want to dive deeper. On Watch is available at safehouseproject.org for free. This is a great one for parents, for educators, for anyone in the community who just wants to dive in deeper. There's some modules in here that specifically cover camming, that look at boyfriending. There's some great videos in there that kind of help paint a better picture of what this might look like in your community. We offer HOPE training for those who are healthcare workers. This counts as those continuing education credits that healthcare workers need each year in order to maintain their licenses. So this is a paid service, but this is something that we offer. We have a Bible study designed to help churches talk about the issue of human trafficking. And we have some books that our CEO and co-founder Brittany Dunn and Bill Wolf have produced on the issue that are pretty good. They're available on Amazon. That's all I have for you guys today. What questions do you have for me?
I don't have any in Q&A, but we'll see if anybody wants to raise their hand if there's any questions. And I'll go to Deidre.
I don't have any questions beside. This was awesome, awesome, awesome. I had experience a little with some teenage girls I had years ago. So I was a little familiar with some of the things, but not as much as she had highlighted tonight. And some things I didn't know about. But my girls was well, once they found them and brought them back to Fayetteville, they was pretty open, especially the older one was pretty open.
Oh, good.
And like just like Miss Martin was saying, it doesn't have to have a particular look. And that's what the older one did. She took the 15-year-old with her because she
Mhm.
was new and they gave her a new name on the street. And it was just, and just talking to them, they went into details like, they would take them here, take them there, did this, did that, provided for them, like you said, gave them things. And what was so disturbing, guys, is it was in high school. All this started at the high school. She knew them. She knew the person when she first got to the high school there because they went to middle school together. But it was a whole the whole family, the family of the young men. It's like a big racketeer that they're running. And so
Mhm.
that's how she was comfortable because her mom had her in it. So when it came from where they were living in, I want to say West Virginia, as they say, birds of a feather flock together because they know their kind. And that's what
Mhm.
happened with her. She picked him out. And I guess through conversation over conversation, she became one of the appointees to bring the new girls in. And that's what she was
Mhm.
doing in high school. So
Absolutely.
it's not just in the community, it's everywhere. It is. So that's what's so
Yeah.
scary even about school now. It's real scary.
For sure. No, and that's a great point is that a lot of times victims are being forced to recruit other victims. In a lot of cases, that's definitely something that we see commonly amongst youth in particular at Safe House Project is that they've been forced like, hey, if you bring your friend in, you get an extra $500 or hey, I'll get you that bag or you get the, whatever the incentive is
Mm-hmm.
if you bring your friends into this. And another thing is that traffickers can be female too. Unfortunately, we've seen lots of cases
Mm-hmm.
where the trafficker is a mother. The trafficker is an aunt to somebody or it's a female teacher or female coach or whoever like that we have this image in our head that these traffickers are just creepy dudes a lot of the
No.
time, right? And that's not necessarily the case. Unfortunately,
Mm-mm.
women will get
And
on
it
it because of things that have been done to
and
them in
it's
their past and normalize it. Like there's a whole lot of reasons, but yeah, they don't necessarily have to just be
yeah, my
creepy
heart
women.
goes out to you because I tell you what, just being with the I guess the policemen that day, the afternoon, it was a long afternoon, but they was go through what called the back page or whatever.
Yes.
And he was like, we just pulled this hurt person yesterday, and now this person is back in there again. So they have a list of those repeaters that go right back. I'm like, man, y'all job is never complete.
Right. No, absolutely.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
But
Thank
I
you, Deidre.
thank
I
you
appreciate you
for
chiming in.
exposing a lot of things I didn't know. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and our trafficking training slides and our watch training, they were actually developed in coordination with a survivor. She looked over everything and improved it. She put her own lived experience into a lot of the information that this information was built off of. So we take survivors' voices very seriously in the field and really appreciate that we have so many people with lived experience who are coming forward and informing a lot of these trainings and everything that we produce as well.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Of course. Anything else,
All
Erica?
right. Any other questions as we wrap up? All right. Well, thank you guys for joining. We appreciate your time and attention. Thank you, Sarah, for this informative training. Like I said, certificates will go out via Gutenberg Certificates in about a week. And then you can email me if you have any questions. Erica.burgess at ffa-nc.org. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming.